Perfect. Hello everyone. So I think we're going to make a start now. So my name's Helen and I'm the Regional Manager at the University of Reading for Europe and UK International. What that means is that all students coming from those parts of the world tend to come through me. So today we're going to talk a little bit about personal statements. We'll do a really short recap of the UCAS application process to start off with, just to quickly refresh our minds, and then we'll go into the personal statement. So you can see that the UCAS application process, there's a few different elements to it. Obviously, the part we're going to be focused on today is the personal statement. And the personal statement is one of the most important parts of the UCAS application because it's the part that is just about you, okay? And it can't be replicated. It's going to be completely unique and individual to your application. But there's other stuff with the UCAS application as well. So we've got effective research and considered choices. So making sure that the universities that you're choosing, you've really thought about, you've done your research and you've really considered why you have applied for that university and that course. A teacher reference, obviously that's going to happen behind the scenes. Your teacher at your school or college will write that reference for you as an important part of the UCAS application. And then we've got some deadlines that we need to note down, and then maybe a little bit of preparation for plan B if things don't go as we have planned. So we're going to cover a lot of that kind of thing, but as I said, focus on the personal statement. We're just going to first look at some key dates. Okay, so just quickly here, who is applying for university for this year, to enter this year in September 2025? Yeah, cool. How about next year, so September 2026? Yeah, we got a few. Or the following year after that, maybe some people, yeah? Cool, okay, perfect. The reason I ask is because there's recently been a reform with the personal statements. So that's happening, coming in for entry in 2026. So all applications submitted for September 2026 will be written in a different format. The personal statement will be in a different format to what it has been previously. So for the person who is applying for this year, you will have to write a personal statement in the old format, which is just one free text field, wherein you write about lots of the stuff we're going to talk about today, but it's just not in the same format as what they've now changed it to. Okay, so that's a bit about the personal statement. Here's some deadlines we want to think about. So applications open in September. So they open in the September, a year before you would start your course. So if you're applying for September 2026, the applications open in September 2025. So you've kind of got a year until you're going to start. Applications for UCAS open in September. If you are applying for Oxford, Cambridge, or medicine, in particular kind of veterinary sciences, there are some courses like that which have a different deadline to everyone else, and that deadline is usually in October. So if you are applying to Oxford and Cambridge, make sure you note that down. Your deadline is going to be different to everyone else's. Mid-January to the end, towards the end of January, is when the deadline for everyone else is. So the UCAS equal consideration deadline is at the end of January. At that point, all universities, if you submit by that deadline, all universities that you submit to have to consider your application. If you submit after that deadline, then the universities technically don't have to consider the application. That being said, lots of universities tend to still consider students after the January deadline, but we always recommend that you do submit by the January deadline. So that's when you submit the application, your UCAS application goes off to your universities and the universities are having a look at it. The next step after that is offers. So that's when the universities read your application and they decide whether or not they're going to make you an offer on the course you have applied for. This usually happens at the very latest in around May time. You should hear back from all of your choices. It's usually a lot quicker than that, and students tend to hear back sometimes within the first month or 2 months of submitting, but we do say that the kind of final time you should be hearing back is around May. Okay? Yeah. If the course that you're applying for has an interview, then your application process is slightly different. It's the same in the sense that you submit by January, all of that kind of stuff, but instead of being made an offer, you will be made an offer of an interview if they read your application and want to offer you an interview. Whether or not you have an interview will depend on what university you're applying for and what course you're applying for. So some courses like architecture, performing arts, physiotherapy, medicine, those kinds of courses tend to have interviews. Most universities will offer these virtually, so you don't have to fly all the way to the UK just for an interview. A lot of the time they will just offer that virtually. But bear that in mind, double check the universities that you're applying for, whether you need an interview or not. So once you've heard back from all of your offers, you've then got to make a decision. So the maximum amount of universities you can apply for is 5. You've got to whittle that list of 5 down to 2. So once you've received all your offers back, you look at them all, you look at all the unis and you think, okay, what are my top 2 favourites? You make your firm choice, which is your absolute favourite. That's the university you want to go to. That's where you're aiming to go. That's your firm choice. Then you make an insurance choice. And that's your second option in case the firm choice doesn't work out. The other 3 choices you have to decline and get rid of. So you're left with 2. Okay? That's the kind of the basics of how the UCAS application tends to work. You can see that then you've got until May, June to reply to all your offers and make that decision about the firm and insurance. What are you going to do? And then on results day, once you have your confirmed results, your offer may have been made unconditional because you have met the conditions of your offer. A lot of this tends to happen around August time, obviously, if you're doing A-levels, because that's A-level results day. If you're doing the Apollitarian, it might be a little bit different. If you're doing both, then the university will consider all of that within the application. If it gets to results day and you haven't quite got the results you thought you were going to get, and you don't meet the requirements for either of your options, so your insurance or your firm, then you can be released into something called clearing. Clearing is kind of like your second chance. So clearing is where you are left unplaced. You're not at a university because you haven't met the conditions of your top 2 choices. And you then have to contact universities and say, hi, have you still got a place on this course? Would you be able to make me an offer? These are my grades that I've got in my A-levels or Apollitarian or whatever qualification it is you're doing. So that tends to happen that will happen this year on the 14th of August. Next year it will be, sometime in August, a similar date. So that's kind of like your second chance if things don't work out. Some universities aren't open for clearing in the UK. Most are. It tends to be places like Imperial or, LSE, I don't think are open for clearing. Oxford, Cambridge, they're probably not going to be open for clearing. But most of the other universities in the UK, yeah, you can. And you usually, we used to call, I suppose a lot of it's done online now. You can go on a live chat on the website and go through clearing. Okay. So that's the UCAS application. That's some key deadlines. But today, obviously, we're talking about the personal statement. And the personal statement is being reformed, okay? So as I mentioned at the start of the talk, coming in September 2025, for 2026 entry, they're changing the way that the personal statement works. And they're making it so instead of one free text field, which it currently is, you are going to have to answer 3 questions. And I've put the questions on the board there. We've got, why do you want to study this course or subject? How have your qualifications and studies helped you to prepare for this course or subject? What else have you done to prepare outside of your education, and why are these experiences helpful? So UCAS have done this to make the process a little bit easier for students, to make it a bit clearer on exactly what the universities want to hear about within the personal statement. But this is obviously quite different to what we've experienced in previous years with UCAS. So, as I said, this is a key section of the UCAS application the application. It is about you. It can't be replicated. It's going to be the part of the application that makes you human, that makes you stand out, that makes the admissions team who are reading it really get to know you as a person and think, okay, why should we accept this student onto our course? You can only write one personal statement, as in it's 3 questions, but you could only answer them once. That one UCAS application is submitted to all 5 choices. You're not doing 5 separate applications. You're doing one application, one personal statement. All of that is all going to the same place. And as I said, it's 3 written statements and it's a 4,000 character limit maximum. So those 4,000 characters are split between the 3 questions. It's kind of up to you how you balance that out. We recommend that you would try and split the 4,000 characters equally among the 3 questions. But you cannot go over that. So on the UCAS application, it is very clear within the boxes that you have to type in that that's the limit. You can't kind of slip a cheeky few extra characters in. That it will just cut you off. You won't be able to put anything more than that. So really bear that in mind when you're writing, that you are limited to those 4,000 characters.
How many words is that usually?
It's usually about one side of A4. Works out to be about that. Yeah, I know characters a bit of, I don't know why they do it as characters and not words. It's weird. They've always done that at UCAS, not sure why.
315.
I'd say maybe about 500, maybe. Yeah, probably about that. But yeah, it's usually like in normal, size 12, 11 font. I'd say like one side of A4. Yeah. So it's not a huge amount. So you've got to make sure that what you're writing is really concise, it's to the point, and that you're getting in all of that key information that the universities need to hear. So what to include? These are some key things that we want to include within those 3 statements. So we want to talk about your interest in the subject. Obviously, very basic, but why are you applying for it? Why are you interested? Where has this interest come from? You want to talk about what skills you've got, what attributes you have got that have made you most suitable for this course, and what you've done to prepare for that. Work experience. We're not expecting you to have, worked in a hospital as a doctor or run your own business or anything like that. But any kind of work experience, volunteer work that you have done can be really fantastic to include within the statement. Something about you. Obviously, personal statement is about you, so you want to make sure that your kind of personality and yourself, your skills, your knowledge shines through. Future plans is something really nice to include. If you do know what you want to do with the degree, that can be a nice thing to pop in the personal statement. If you're taking a gap year, or if you've done a gap year, if you've got any extra experiences, that's also quite a nice thing to mention. Personal achievements, whether it's a sporting achievement, whether it's something you've done at school or college, anything like that, that's going to be really nice to mention within the statement. And then if you've attended any taste days, masterclasses, anything additional in your spare time, that's also going to be really worth mentioning. Now we're going to have a look at the different questions and what we might put in each one. So the first question we're going to look at is, why do you want to study this course or subject? So within this question, you want to make sure that you've really got your enthusiasm and your interest in the subject shining through in your answer. Where has this interest come from? Is it that you've studied this previously at school? Is it that you've discovered this in your spare time and you've then done research and looked to enhance your knowledge in that way? Okay, so we want to know why. Make sure that you've done research into the subject, okay? Doesn't mean you need to have written, essays and done an in-depth study of the subject you're looking to go and complete, but just done a bit of research and really enhanced your knowledge to make sure that you've got a good, at least basic understanding of the course that you're looking to apply for. Independent learning and inquiry, this is a really, really key skill that you're going to need at university. So again, that's linked into the research. You want to make sure that you've let the admissions tutor know that you've done your research and you've got those skills, because they're going to be really important when you start your studies at university. And then you were talking about how you've applied those skills that you've learned, whether that's within your schoolwork, your college work, your A-levels, your politarian, whatever it is you're studying, how have you applied that? And then thinking about your future ambitions as well. So why do you want to study this subject? Are you doing it to go into a particular career? Or are you doing it because you want to enhance your knowledge to go on to do postgraduate study? What is it that has attracted you? Why are you interested in this subject? Okay. The admissions tutors, by the way, so in case you didn't know who that was, I realised I was using that term and hadn't said what it was. The admissions tutors are the people who are going to be reading your application. So they're the people that work in the university who sit all day and read the applications, read the personal statements. So there's a real human being kind of at the other end of the computer there. Now let's have a look at how we can demonstrate that knowledge. Okay, so how are we going to demonstrate why we're interested? Where has this come from? Why do we want to study this? So as I said, we've got to demonstrate the understanding. I mentioned before there's different ways you can do this. You can talk about how if you've learnt or focused on that at school or college, talk a little about that. Is there a particular event or something that has inspired you to study this subject? So just demonstrate the understanding and the interest. And then you want to talk about your aptitude for the subject. So what we mean by that is, how are you suited for that subject? What skills do you have that make you suitable to study that program? What knowledge do you have? What have you done in your spare time? What have you done in relation to that subject in order to enhance the knowledge there? And we've just got a few questions that they might get some thoughts going below there to get some ideas about what to write. So have you studied this subject at school? If so, how can you link that knowledge that you've learnt or gained at school to the subject area? If it's a brand new subject, then how can you demonstrate that understanding? So is it that you've done things outside of your studies to research? Is it that you've done a bit of volunteer work or work placement or anything like that that's very much linked to that subject? How else can we demonstrate that? And then what makes you a good fit for this program? And that's where thinking about those skills really come in. So next, we've got how have your qualifications and studies helped you prepare for this course or subject? So that's the second question that we're going to be answering. So this is obviously very much linked to your academics. So this is going to be talking about your A-levels or your Equalitarian, any subjects and qualifications that you hold that we can link in. Obviously, with some courses, you may not have studied an A-level or an Equalitarian subject that is that exact subject, because there's loads of stuff you can study at university that you can't study at school. So things like, creative writing or journalism or even medicine, there's lots of subjects that you might not have done exactly at school and done a qualification in, but that doesn't mean that you've never touched them before. There's lots of subjects at school that you could link into so many different things. So for example, stuff like medicine or like biomedical sciences, you can't really study those at school, but you could have done chemistry, you could have done biology, and the knowledge that you learn from those subjects, you can say, okay, I have these qualifications, I learned these things from these studies, and that's how it links to these subjects. So as I said, if you're applying for something that is not something you studied at school, that's fine, but think about what skills you have and what knowledge you have from the subjects that you've taken and how that can be linked in. And a really key thing to think about when we're thinking about that kind of thing is your skills, okay? So think about all of the transferable skills that you have learned and earned from your education and how these are going to translate into a degree. So we've got a few, I've already mentioned a few new ones. So we've got things like research skills, communication skills, working in a team, written skills, essay-based skills, subject-specific knowledge. If there's particular modules and particular bits of knowledge you have that are directly related to the subject, mention that, talk about that within this question. That's going to be really, really important. And then you want to think about the skills, the knowledge, all of that kind of stuff, and think, how is this going to help me succeed at university? And try and structure the personal statement so you're hitting all of those key points concisely. So you're talking about, right, this is the knowledge I have, this is what I've learned, and then this is the skills I got from it, and this is how it's going to help me succeed at university. So that's a really good way to answer the question quite concisely, to stay on point. We usually call it the ABC rule because it's the action, the benefit, and the course. So the action would be the thing, so the subject, the bit of knowledge that you've learned. Then the B, the benefit, is the skill you got from it, and the C is linking it back to the course. Okay? So that's a really kind of concise way and hopefully a good way to structure your answer to that question. And then the last question we've got is, what else have you done to prepare outside of your education, and why are these experiences helpful? So this is where we have a think about the things outside of school or college, outside of studies that we have completed that are really going to help us. And here's a few examples of that. So things like work experience, volunteer work, if you've attended any lectures, if you've listened to any podcasts, if you've done any online courses, listened to TED Talks, gone to museums, gone to open days, completed subject tasters, anything like that that is outside of your studies, we want to have a think about in this section, okay? And how have those experiences influenced your intention to apply for this course? How are they going to help you when you study at the university, okay? So we really want to think about everything outside of our studies that we have done that are going to help us. These are some of the ways that work experience and volunteering can really, really help you in this question and also in your studies at university. So obviously it gives you an insight into your future career, doing some kind of volunteer work or work placement, whether that's in an area that you're looking to go into and work one day, or whether it's trying out something new. It can really help influence that. Also, it shows that you're committed to self-improvement and that you're wanting to really kind of prepare yourself for university before you get there. So that looks really good to the admissions team and the people that are going to be reading the application. Obviously, it's going to help broaden your perspective outside of school because it's giving you all of those new experiences, learning all those new skills. And then obviously, this is some evidence as to how you've earned some key skills. So things like working in a team, things like communication, things like time management, all of that kind of stuff, you're going to be talking about in the personal statement that you've got, and you want to have some evidence about where you've got that from, where you've got those skills. So I think we've only got a few minutes left, so I'm just going to whiz through the last slide or so. Here's some activities that we can think about to demonstrate all of those skills that we've spoken about. And these can be within all of the questions. So we've got projects and assignments. We can think about that for the studies question, the second question. Positions of responsibility, again, this can be quite flexible because you could have had a position of responsibility in school, so stuff like being a prefect or being on the school council, anything like that. Or it could be that you've done something outside of your studies as well. Sports, music, drama, any extracurricular activities that you've completed, that's going to look really good because, again, although these experiences might not seem overly directly relevant to the course you're applying for, you would have learnt loads and loads of skills from those experiences that you can still write about in that third question. So the third question isn't necessarily about your studies, it's about what have you got, what experiences, what skills have you got where you've gained skills, and these skills are going to help you at the university. So as I said, they don't need to be directly related to the subject. You can, if you worked, as a waitress in a cafe, you have learned communication skills, you've learned team building skills, you've learned, patience, customer service, all of that kind of stuff. And you could be looking to go and do a degree in biology. And you're still going to need skills like that for biology. So you can see how we've connected that experience of just working as a waitress. We can connect that experience into a degree because it's all about what you got from that experience. And that is what we can write about in that third question. And then obviously we've spoken about volunteering, part-time jobs, that kind of thing. So we've only got a couple minutes left, so I'm just going to very quickly go through some common mistakes. So avoid using cliche statements within the personal statement. It's obviously a waste of words. We want to make sure it's unique to you and that you're really maximising all those words, so just try and avoid it. Same thing with unexplained quotes. We get this a lot in personal statements where students will chuck in a random quote, which maybe to them is meaningful, but to the person reading it maybe not so much. So just make sure that because you're on such a limited characters, make sure that every single word counts. Using humour can be quite risky. It could come across not how you intended during the personal statement, so we always say try and avoid that as much as obviously we love having a bit of a laugh. That doesn't always translate, especially within something like a formal application to a university. Plagiarism, obviously I don't even need to mention this because none of you would dream of plagiarising and copying anyone else's work from the internet, but obviously that's something that the universities will be looking out for. Every personal statement is run through software now to check for how much has been written by AI, if any, because obviously AI is up and coming at the moment, it's everywhere, we can't avoid it. Personal statements are run through that software, so be aware of that. That being said, obviously we know students will probably be using AI. So we just say that if you're going to use it, make sure you're using it to help yourself. So if you get AI to, I don't know, give you a rough summary of something, use that information and make it your own. But obviously this is the personal statement, it's personal to you, so a computer shouldn't be able to write it because it's meant to be about you. It's meant to be about your personal experiences and knowledge. So that's that one. Mentioning university names. As I said at the start, this one personal statement is going to all 5 choices. So don't mention university names. If us at Reading are reading your application and then we see they've written, I really want to come to the University of Sheffield, and we think, oh, they don't want to come to Reading, they want to go to Sheffield. So it could potentially not turn out favourably for you. Not using all available space is a very common mistake that people make. They think, oh, I can just write, a sentence per question, off I go. Similar in the old format of the personal statement, they'd write a tiny little paragraph and that was it. Don't do that, guys. Try and use as much of the words as you possibly can to get all of that information to the universities. And then last but not least, obviously we know spelling and grammar. Just make sure that it's grammatically correct, make sure it's been read through and checked and proofread and all that kind of stuff. So those are some of the most overused opening lines that we had in the old personal statement. I like to keep that on there just because people are always interested. We have a lot of from a young age, I've always wanted to, which obviously could of course be true for lots of people, but it's not very original, and it just means the admissions team are kind of, oh, another one with that opening line, so just try and avoid those. We have hit time, so I'm going to stop there. I hope that was helpful for you. If you have any questions, please let me know.